Okay, thank you so much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for inviting me to this program, The Future. My name is Prof Ekekwe. I'm speaking today from the United States of America. Now we'll be having a conversation on equipping the next generation of difference makers. I thank the organizers for making such a conversation possible, especially in this time when we are looking for a new generation of leaders across different domains, leaders in politics, leaders in technology, leaders in markets, and beyond. So for us to get into that conversation, I begin by explaining the frictions in our world. If you go around the world today, there are so many frictions. Frictions are the challenges that many times that we face in life. The challenges, the political systems, the challenges, the market systems, the challenges across all domains. And if you look at these frictions from North America to Africa, Asia, Europe, and beyond, we see that the world is looking for different makers. These different makers are going to become the enablers that will carry that epistle of change, bringing new ordinance across different domains of our lives. And I will have this conversation focusing specifically on markets and looking at companies, looking at economic systems, and how these different makers can actually come in and change the societies that we live. So to do that, I will explain the most fundamental constructs in market system. Of course, understanding from our elementary economics that in any market system, you need to have what we call demand and supply. The demand, of course, the people, the consumers, the supply are the producers. And most times, because markets are imperfect, the imperfection of market makes it nearly impossible sometimes for the demand and supply to come into a near equilibrium point. Just to make it a little bit easy to understand, assume that NDBC has just landed in Owerri right now, and I don't have any family member that I can actually go to eat. And let's assume there is no restaurants in Owerri. The propensity that the only option I will have is that I have to start knocking at every door in Owerri looking for somebody who has food. But at the same time, I'm knocking at the door, there is also someone who has food, and I may not discover that particular person. We say that what is happening is what we call information asymmetry. Information asymmetry is basically saying that the demand has information that he is hungry. The supply has information that the supply has food. But because they cannot come into an equilibrium point, transaction cannot take place. So at the end of the day, I'll remain hungry, while the person who has food may actually not find somebody that buy that food, and that food can just get wasted. So we say that such a market system is imperfect. The same thing happens in banking. You have money, you're looking for somebody to borrow that money, you can't find. So what do? You take it to a bank, and the bank now create an orchestration that makes it possible that the person who has that money takes it to the bank pays you the interest you want, and the bank will not lend it to the other person. So what am I trying to connect here to difference makers? What I'm trying to connect here is that if you look at all the problems in our society, if you look at all the challenges that we have in our world, economically, you realize that through market systems that we can fix frictions that we have in our societies. The problems we have in electricity, the problem we have in clean water, the problem we have in education. It turns out that companies are the vehicles through which some of those problems could be solved. So if companies are the vehicles to solve these frictions, the implication is that by acquiring and building companies will become a vehicle for us to build a better world. So how do you now build companies? You have to build companies, you have to acquire capabilities. The person who runs a restaurant, you need to have the ability to cook good food. The person who runs a bank, you need to have a capacity to run a bank. And by offering those services, you now make it possible for people to come and they can now get their problems fixed. You have opportunities in the market with frictions that the customers have. And to solve those frictions, companies are established, and those companies need to have capabilities which qualify them to offer those services. And then by executing on those capabilities, they go into the market system to now fix those frictions that customers have. So within these capabilities, that is now where you can find the opportunities for us to become different makers and leaders in our societies. And then within the difference makers, we need to now build those companies. We need to now go and solve the frictions. And as part of doing that, we need to have knowledge. Knowledge is a very critical part of that system. You need to have knowledge in what you are trying to do, because without knowledge, you don't really have the capacity to actually get anything done. If you go through human history, nations rise as a result of the capacity to accumulate and apply knowledge at scale. And if you go to the Bible, read the Bible, to see that when Moses appeared before the Israelites, that they were thrilled because he studied under the Pharaohs. The Pharaohs had the best educational system at that time. The best astrologers and thinkers, they were all living in Egypt. So when Moses has gone through the education of Pharaohs, the Israelites thought that they have had somebody who actually was well prepared to help them get to the land they have been promised. So knowledge is key, and the knowledge of a nation defines the prosperity of a nation. The best of America today is not because they make good bombs. The best of America is today because they have some of the finest educational systems in the world. And because of the capacity to have ability to fix frictions at scale through that knowledge system, they continue to uplift, they continue to advance their societies. And we also need the difference makers and entrepreneurial capitalism. If you have the knowledge and you don't have people that can take risk, nothing gets done. So we need pioneers in markets. We need people that can take risk, because by applying that knowledge to solve societal problems, we make society better. So you need pioneers in markets. You need innovators, people that can now not just be doing the talking, but can also get into the market and begin to get things done. Nations rise because of these pioneers. You come to America, you see men like Rockefeller, D.Y. Mellon, Carnegie. When you go to Africa, you can talk about Dangote, Elumelu, Jim Ovia. And across other domains, you can see that nations have been transformed as a result of people who have these pioneering spirit to go into the market and solve problems. These are the different makers. These are people that change the ordinance of the societies that they live. Of course, not all of us can be the risk takers. We also need executors of business models. The knowledge has been established. The risk takers have emerged, but we also need labor. What role will you be playing? Can you be a difference maker in that company? It's very, very critical, because at any level we are in business, at any level we are in a society, at any level we are in a company, we can make a difference. It's only when we have that kind of mindset, that is the time that we can begin to change and build a future that we want. Markets are defined by three fundamental things: the people, the processes, and tools. And when you harmonize these three components together, you can build capacities to fix frictions at scale through products and services. So we know that doing these things are going to be very key. And as we do them, you can now see different paths for these different makers. You can see careers. Some of us are going to work in companies. Some of us are going to go into building companies. But at the end of the day, let's see that we are going to become agents of change. and of course, positive change in our societies. Either we are picking jobs in companies that have been established, or we are pioneering new opportunities in markets. We just have to have the mindset that in all these scenarios, the key thing here is that we have to be leaders, new generation of different makers, because the opportunities of the future, they are waiting for us to rise. Nations have obligations in these areas. You need to have the ability for you to move societies from what I have called the invention society to innovation society. Invention societies are societies where there's so many ideas, but people cannot just figure out how to translate those ideas into products and services that can solve people's problems. And I give a very good example here by looking at this plot. I have taken the GDP of China and United States because they are the two most dominant economies. But if you look at the gross world product, essentially aggregation of all the whole global economics, the curves to a large extent looks like this. What is saying here is that just before the last 500 years from today, that the gross world product was flat. In other words, the GDPs of China, the GDP of the United States, they were all flat. And if the GDP is flat over a long period of time, it basically means that per capita income will decelerate. In other words, if you divide the GDP of the population of the people, it means that people were actually getting poorer. Because of what? The population was increasing while the GDP was flat over centuries. Meaning people that lived here were actually poorer than people that lived here. And people that lived here were poorer than people that lived here because the GDP was not growing even as population was increasing. If you go back to your agricultural science textbook, you must have read about Reverend Marx, the man who postulated that the food production was going in arithmetic progression while human population was going geometric population progression. The implication of that was this, that over a period of time, we're going to run out of food. If you also look here, something began to change. A linear flattening GDP started growing in an exponential form. And what that means is that the GDP was rising. It means there were different makers who turned the society that was not growing economically to a society that started ramping up exponentially. How do we move Nigeria? How do we move Africa from a flattened GDP to one that begins to grow exponentially? That is the whole mission. That is the whole challenge of our generation. This society is full of ideas, but they don't have products. But this society has products and services. And it's only when you have products and services that is the time that you can overcome frictions, because the only way to overcome friction is to have products and services in markets. The market frictions are forces, as in physics, and the only way to overcome market friction is to have product forces in order to overcome, because that's what the customers need to be faced. Men lived here. They created some of the most fundamental constructs of physics and mathematics and chemistry. Very brilliant people. But many of them died poor because many things were missing. The people that lived here and living here built products based on those fundamental elements that these men lived. They created compounds, but they couldn't make vaccines. When tuberculosis came, it killed them. When malaria came, it killed them. When polio came, it killed them. But these people, not just understanding compounds, they made vaccines. Different makers here. And that's what our society needs today. So if you can also go through a lot of more human history and inventions across generations, they created so many fascinating things, but they could not just change the GDPs through growth. But the innovation society era is a time when we're not just talking about ideas, we're talking about creating products and services, and many beautiful things that happen. But I'm telling you something, that a new age is coming, the wave 2 of the innovation society era, where we're going to be looking at artificial intelligence, autonomous systems, and all kinds of new species of technology systems that will change the ordinance that we are used to. If that happens, our world will never be the same. And it's going to be huge because the world is going to create new species of products and services. Machines that have intelligence, machines that are autonomously reconfigure themselves. And these things are going to change the contract that we have in farms and the contract that we have in societies. It looks very exciting, but it's just at the level of infancy. So different makers have to change our societies by helping us to fix the frictions that we have through markets. And knowledge is a very critical part of it. And if you look through human history, it has always been like that. Nations that have the capacity to create new body of knowledge, they are the ones that will dominate and rule. If America closes all their top 50 universities within a decade, America will just be like Nigeria. But because these schools exist, they renew, create new knowledge systems, and those new knowledge systems will help them solve the societal problems they face every day. Nigeria can also go back to see some level of evolutions in terms of changes as a result of many, many things happening in that country. 1990s gave us the new generation banks, when some of the leading banking institutions we have today were created. GT Bank, Zenith Bank, many of them were born in the 1990s. In 20s, we have the voice telephony when MTN, Globe, and all the telecommunications companies, they came at scale, difference makers. And then in 2010s, we moved into the mobile internet era, where our smartphones started coming up and we were now using our phones to connect to the internet. And now we are having a new dimension of different makers. Call them the application utility era innovators of the 2020s, when young people are now configuring, reconfiguring, organizing factors of production at scale to build product services across different domains of market system, logistics, retail, entertainment, fintech, and they are unleashing these in our society, changing everything that we have known. And they are just starting. They're going to be the difference makers of our time. And they are changing agriculture, changing healthcare, changing financial services, changing education. Hopefully, Nigeria saw 500 billion GDP, which I think optimally we should be 3 trillion, looking at our population and our capacity economically and natural resources. So the application utility innovators are going to be the difference makers. And they are already playing major roles. That the largest financial institution in Nigeria today is not one of those banks, you know. MTN market cap is bigger than all the banks, bigger than all the insurance companies, bigger than all the other financial banking institutions of any form. That means that the MTN can buy every bank in Nigeria and still have change, and can also buy the insurance companies and other financial institutions. That tells you that redesigns are happening, and because of those redesigns, we are having new domains of different makers. The different makers of financial services of future may not just be the big banks that you know today. We are already seeing new species of companies. We talk about Florawave, talk about OPay, talk about these are at least companies that are worth at least $1 billion. At least worth $1 billion. And there are so many of them that are coming. I do predict that by 2023, we're going to have at least 15 unicorns in Nigeria. This means companies that are worth at least $1 billion. And they are coming in different forms, different shapes, and different levels of capabilities. And they are being born every day, being born every week in different levels of growth. Different makers of markets. You can see them. And then going in politics, you can also find, you can also go in education, you can find. But I'm just focusing on economic difference makers. The empires of the future are being built and are being born. At Ekedia Capital, my business, where we invest in startups, we see how these new species of companies are growing daily, accumulating capabilities at scale and bringing new ordinance in market system. They can shape our world in a way that we have not expected. As we do that, and I also want to take you, because understand that this is a Christian program. And as we talk about different makers, we're talking about leadership. Ascension to that leadership, so many domains of that. Business, technology, politics. So many attributes can use to define leaders, clear missions, result-oriented, accumulate capabilities to create next frontiers. The accumulation of capabilities basically saying you build yourself with competence and abilities to get things done. Those things that you have called to do, you have the ability to do them. You are result-oriented. You have a clear mission you're going. And using the case of Jesus calling the 12 apostles, you can see how a difference maker, a leader, was able to organize a group of people. He prepared them, he trained them. And then he knew that the time will come, that training will be very critical for them to execute the mission, because they had to be prepared for them to go in and execute the mission. If you go through history, at AD 67, when General Titus and Vespasian now attacked the temple and Jerusalem was put in rage, those disciples, they were running around Jerusalem, scattered all over the world. The mission of these apostles started an errors. They have not been prepared. They have not been tutored. They will not have had the capacity to be difference makers of a generation. The generation before us and the generation to come. So the point is this, that there is a template of what it means to accomplish a mission. You need to build and prepare an extremely committed people. That's what it would take you to be a difference maker. It has to be something that is sustainable beyond you. And it means you have to raise a generation after you. You can also look at vital attributes. You look at men like Nehemiah. Nehemiah was asked by the king, what do you need to go and rebuild the wall of Jerusalem? Nehemiah said, I want to use the timber from the king's forest. This is a very great strategist, and I've called him one of the finest project managers in the world. Because if you look at the Bible, read through, you see there's so many attributes, but Nehemiah demonstrated a very high level of project management capabilities. Because in the old Persian world, no one would waste a timber from the king's forest. Because the timber with the kings from the king's forest will always go with the best bricklayers, with the best security. Because if you waste any timber from the king's forest, you die. So Nehemiah basically said, King, give me the timber from your forest, because anything that is going to be built with that timber is as good as done, because no one can waste it, otherwise that person will die. He was a very great strategist. He understood what was important. He understood the critical success factor for the project, and he asked for the right tool. Difference makers have to have the capacity to understand the most important thing they need to be successful. Nehemiah said, give me the timber from the king's forest. And they gave him the timber, gave him the best security, gave him the best bricklayers. And he was able to execute and rebuild the wall. We also need to have our awareness and observation. We need to be attentive in our spirit and in our mind. As Moses was under the mountain, he saw a burning bush. Moses did not run away. The Lord wanted to get his attention. If he did not pay attention, he might not have seen that burning bush. First thing, he paid attention. Different makers need to pay attention. We need to be observant. And you also have to have a spirit of boldness. Moses did not run away. Somebody would say, hey, I saw this bush. It was burning and not consumed. He will start running. Moses said, no, I will be there. I will go and find out what is going over there. We need to have that spirit of boldness. But that is what will help us to become difference makers. It's very, very critical. And we also have to have the visionary mindset. Bible says that the time that came, that the house of Patmos, an angel came to John. From there he wrote the Revelation. You remember, if you read history, John had essentially performed many miracles, many ways. They put him in a burning oil in Rome. He converted many people in the Colosseum. So they didn't know what to do with him. He said, let's take this man out of Rome so that he will not have another opportunity of converting more people. Let's not even try to kill him, because all the times we gather people to kill him, he ended up converting them with these miracles. Let's take him out, take him to the house of Patmos, to an island where he will just die, old man, one day. And right there in the house of Patmos, he saw a bigger revelation, a revelation that was bigger than Rome. It's a revelation of all ages. And he wrote a revelation. The point is this, that many times visionaries come in special ways, taking you out of that head office to the branch, that you could be in the branch and see a world that is bigger than the head office. You need to have that spirit. That's how you become a difference maker. John became a difference maker right in that island. He was no more preaching to Rome. He preached to the whole world. And also demonstration of competence and preparedness. When King Belshazzar called Daniel after the mother said, when your father was the king of this land, there was this Hebrew boy who was smart and basically the chief of staff. But when Belshazzar took over from his father Nebuchadnezzar, he basically took out Daniel. Daniel was remembered by the mother of King Belshazzar. He called, let's go and call this Hebrew boy, because a hand was writing on the wall. What was that talking about? Oh, Daniel. Daniel came and interpreted. Of course, it wasn't a very good one for King Belshazzar, but he interpreted. But my point is this: different makers rise to occasions when they are called. You need to have that attribute that when you are called, your competence will speak. Your preparedness at moments, in seasons and out of seasons, you'll be ready. Daniel delivered. Just like when Moses was called to lead the Israelites, he was prepared. He did not say, Master, Lord, give me time. He was ready. We need to be ready. We need to be prepared. And also we need to have a spirit of elevating others. That is one of those signs of being a difference maker. Ability to lift all from the miracle for anywhere they may be. And Jesus Christ was in the pool of Bethesda. He asked the man, what do you want me to do for you? So the man saying, Master, I want to walk. So they're giving excuses. I've been here for years. Whenever the angels stir the water, no one takes me to the water to be made whole. But he did not know that a grand master of angels was there before him. It happens many times. You need a job. Say, hey, I made a third class. I made a first class. I made a fourth class, whatever it takes. Instead of saying, yes, sir, I need a job. Jesus was gracious. Despite the man answering out of point. You know what? Say, man, walk. So we need to have that mindset to be a difference maker in people's lives. And that means even when they fail themselves, we must not father. Jesus did not consider the fact that this man answered at a point, and he still said, sure, you were waiting for an angel to come to stir the water, you're waiting for somebody to dip you in. These things are not necessary because the water and the angel I make, and I'm the boss. So different makers show compassion. The Bible says that for God was in Christ Jesus, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses, but has committed the word of reconciliation unto them. My expectation here today is we will be the difference makers of our time. Thank you so much for the opportunity.